Okay, let's talk about Catelyn III. Catelyn III is the last chapter that was in order of the ones that George wrote before he took his break to do his pilot, his failed pilot Doorways. But I think maybe he intended Tyrion 2 to be after it, and then he swapped the order. It doesn't really matter. The chapters kind of happen simultaneously. Um, but this one, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense because this one takes place 8 days after Ned leaves, and Tyrion 2 takes place, or they jump in a fortnight after they've left. So it's, you know, it's swapping things around. This one actually does happen before Tyrion 2, even though it's ordered after. But this is kind of famous for Catelyn 3 is, and maybe this is true of all the Catelyn chapters in a Game of Thrones. The Catelyn chapters are so well paced, they're so well written, they're so fun, and they're also just ridiculous. I mean, characters are ridiculous. What's accepted is ridiculous. You can kind of just laugh at everything, even though it's just so much fun. And obviously, I think when people read a Game of Thrones, the Catelyn chapters, especially the early Catelyn chapters, are the things that really um, drive the story and pull people in, even though they're quite over the top, really. And we'll get into some of it. It's fun and nitpicky. Some of it's more than nitpicks, but here we go. As again, Catelyn is also George R. Martin's kind of default voice. It's poetic, but not um, Anyway, Ned and the girls were 8 days gone when Maester Luwin came to her one night in Bran's sick room, carrying a reading lamp and the book of accounts. It's past time that we reviewed the figures, my lady, he said. You want to know how much this royal visit cost us. Um, so right off the bat, we're being presented with the fact that Catelyn is supposed to be the one running Winterfell at this point, and she simply can't do it in her mental state. Catelyn looked at Bran in his sickbed and brushed his hair back off his forehead. It had grown very long, she realized. She would have to cut it soon. I have no need. Hair growth is something that happens at incredible rates in Ice and Fire. Dany gets her hair back really fast. She'd have to cut it soon. I have no need to look at figures, Maester Luwin, she told him, never taking her eyes from Bran. I know what the visit cost us. Take the books away. Luwin really walked into that one. Yeah. So, my lady, the king's party had healthy appetites. We must replenish our stores before she cut him off. I said, take the books away. The steward will attend to our needs. So all through the books, we kind of get these hints that starvation is coming. Here it's sort of, there was a big party, so now we don't really have that many stores, so much food. And then later in a Clash of Kings during the Harvest Festival, they sort of say, are people really putting aside enough grain for the winter and things like this? By the time we get to A Dance with Dragons, it is true that the Winterfell stores are completely empty. But we're not sure exactly why that is. It could be that that they're burned and taken by Ramsay and such, but they're empty and they have to have food taken in from the other houses, and then they are starving again because there's so many people and not enough food. But this was always hinted at. Oh, starvation! Winter is coming. There's going to be starvation. We have no steward. Van Poole has gone south with Ned. Maester Lewin reminded her, like a little gray rat. She thought he would not let go. I always thought this was kind of funny because the Catelyn doesn't have any ill will towards Lewin in any sort of greater sense, but she uses the same term later Lady Dustin uses to refer to the maesters, the gray rats, So I'm not sure if this was an intentional callback or if it's just, they wear gray and they're scurrying around. And so he's going to naturally come to this comparison more than once by coincidence. But there it is. Catelyn calls him a gray rat. Poole went south to establish Lord Eddar's household at King's Landing. Yes. Catelyn nodded absently. Oh, yes, I remember. Bran looked so pale. She wondered whether they might move his bed under the window so he can get the morning sun. Maester Luwin set the lamp in a niche by the door and fiddled with the wick. There are several appointments that require your immediate attention, my lady. Besides the steward, we need a captain of the guards to fill Jory's place, and a new master of horse. Her eyes snapped around and found him. A master of horse! Her voice was a whip. The maester was shaken. Yes, my lady. Hullen rode south with Lord Eddard, so... My son lies here broken and dying, Luwin, and you wish me to discuss a new master of horse? Do you think I care what happens in the stables? Do you think it matters to me one whit? I would gladly butcher every horse in Winterfell with my own hands if it would open Bran's eyes. Do you understand that? Do you? So of course this is this is a little foreshadowing here, because the entire reason that the Catspaw is able to exist at Winterfell is that he's hiding in the stables, which would have been noticed by the master of horse. So the fact that she has not done her duty actually causes the entire incident in the first place. So this is kind of just grinding it in there. I mean, it's funny that she focuses on the master of horse. She could have easily said master of steward, master of guard, but no, she's like, master of horse. I don't care about horses. Well, you should have cared about the horses, right? Because there's a murderer hiding in the stables. But but yes, it's all Kat's fault that she didn't have a master of horse. He bowed his head. Yes, my lady, but the appointments. I'll make the appointments, Robb said. Catelyn had not heard him enter, but he stood in the doorway looking at her. She had been shouting, she realized with sudden flush of shame. What was happening to her? She was so tired. Her head hurt all of the time. I don't know. I mean, one could probably read into this, with the supernatural elements, what was happening to her. Maybe people are messing with her head and making her forget things. But obviously, the idea of Robb coming in and making these appointments is kind of the entire plot of the first three books, with the Catelyn story about Catelyn leading and Robb being ready to lead, and Catelyn's role in advising and guiding him, and when he chooses to step up. It's interesting because here they really push it. Robb is ready, Catelyn's out of it. But in the later books, it's actually that Robb thinks he's so great and stops listening to Catelyn. And had he listened to Catelyn, things would have gone better. So the latter books are actually kind of about Robb not being ready, even though here she's quite impressed with him and him wanting to step up and things like that. But the moral of the story is kind of don't be too proud and listen to your mom a little bit. She may seem nuts, but she when she says don't trust the young Greyjoy and don't and honor your marriage agreements with Walder Frey, maybe you should listen to her. Maester Luwin looked from Catelyn to her son. I've prepared a list of those we might wish to consider for the vacant offices, he said, offering Robb a paper plucked from the sleeve. Her son glanced at the names. He had come from outside. Catelyn saw. His cheeks were red from the cold, his hair shaggy and windblown. Good men, he said. We'll talk of them tomorrow. He handed back the list of names. And so, I mean, kind of in the sense that Luwin is the one really running things here at Winterfell. The gray rat. I mean, like is Robb the 14-year-old boy really going to be like, oh no, this is a bad list. I've got I've got better stuff, Lewin. So Lewin is Lewin's really in control here. The gray rat. Leave us now, Robb. Leave us now, Robb said. Maester Lewin bowed and departed. Robb closed the door behind him and turned to her. He was wearing a sword, she saw. Mother, what are you doing? Catelyn had always thought of that Robb looked like her. like Bran and Rickon and Sansa. He had the Tully coloring, the auburn hair, the blue eyes. Some people joke about, George R.R. Martin genetics, that people look like one parent or the other, and that's the way things work, and you try to figure out genetics from this, taking after the mother or taking after the father. It's not exactly like that. It's true that George R. R. Martin does it a lot, much more than real life, than it happens in real life. But certainly characters have traits of both. Like, for instance, Shireen, looks like Stannis and Selyse. And then some people do have qualities that are of neither parent. Sansa has lighter hair than her mother, and Ned has darker hair. So little things like that. I'm sure if you go through, you can find. There's a Targaryen who I forgot her name, but she spontaneously has just like a golden streak in her hair, even though her parents did, and things like that. You can certainly go through the thousands of characters and find characters that don't take after either, just in real life genetics is complicated. But admittedly, George R. R. Martin does make it mostly simple with most characters. Yet now, for the first time, she saw something in Eddard Stark's face, something as stern and hard as the North. And it's funny, everybody sees Ned as stern and hard, and yet we're in Ned's head and he's not that. So it's like all the other characters view him this way, but he's not that at all. What am I doing here? She echoed, puzzled. How can you ask that? What do you imagine I'm doing? I'm taking care of your brother. I'm taking care of Bran. Oh, what am I doing here? Taking care of Bran. Is that what you call it? You haven't left this room since Bran was hurt. You didn't even come to the gate when Father and the girls went south. I said my farewells to them here and watched them ride out from the window. She had begged Ned not to go. Not now. Not after what happened. And this is an interesting little switch. Everything had changed now. Couldn't he see it? It was no use. He had no choice, he had told her, and then left, choosing. He had no choice, he had told her, and then he left, choosing. Of course, yeah. So it's a funny little switch on what happened. So the idea is here, going back and summarizing, like, Ned didn't want to go south, but Cat, because she had seen Mama Direwolf in the snow, was scared of the prophetic message of the direwolf choking on the stag. And so she didn't want to have any sort of conflict between Baratheon and Stark, so she tells Ned to go. But then, and in reality, one of the reasons that she didn't really want him to go is she didn't want him to take Bran. But now Bran has fallen, and so Bran isn't going. And so she's asking, well, I'm sorry, I had that reverse. She wanted Ned to go because of the prophecy, even though that would mean that he would take Bran, even though Bran's her favorite, but because of the family duty honor thing and the prophecy and all of this. And then all of a sudden, after Bran falls, she reverses that, and suddenly she doesn't care about the prophecy anymore and doesn't want Ned to go. Or now that she's seen that they can come after her family, she doesn't yet suspect the Lannisters of throwing Bran from the tower. So I don't know why she makes the choice, the choice of him. She changes her mind about him wanting to go. I guess she's so distracted and so distraught and wants to keep the family together. And it's a time of need. that now Mama Direwolf prophecy doesn't mean anything. And she makes it all of a sudden his choice. Why Ned doesn't change his mind is also not really explained. Because now keep in mind in the show they flip this. Catelyn from the beginning doesn't want him to go, and he feels like he needs to go. So anyway, confusing. I can't leave him even for a moment. Not when any moment could be their last. I have to be with him. If she took her son's limp hand, sliding her fingers through her own. He was so frail and thin, with no strength left in his hand, and she could still feel the warmth of life through his skin. Robb's voice softened. He's not going to die, Mother. Maester Lewin said the time of greatest danger has passed. In real life, this is completely the opposite. If you go into a long coma, they really think that there's not much after about the first few weeks. There's not much hope of waking up, and if you do wake up, your brain is mostly gone. And so it's and what if Maester Lewin is wrong? What if Bran needs me and I'm not here? Rickon needs you, Robb said sharply. He's only 3. He doesn't understand what's happening. He thinks everyone has deserted him, so he follows me around all day, clutching my leg and crying. I don't know what to do with him. He paused a moment, chewing on his lower lip, the way he'd done when he was little. Mother, I need you too. I'm trying, but I can't. I can't do it all by myself. So it seems like that Robb is stressed out, and it's true. Later on, he needs her as an advisor when he becomes king. Catelyn remembered that his voice broke with sudden emotion. Catelyn remembered that he was only 14, and this is almost certain. It's almost certain that this is pointed out that Robb is a boy and he's only 14, as a contrast to Dany, who is being forced to marry and have sex at 13, changed from 12, and sort of like this. So we clearly intentional that we're establishing here that teenagers are not emotionally capable of handling a lot of things, and that the world is shoving things upon them, and here we're reminded that with Robb, that he's a kid. Dany's a kid, She wanted to get up to go to him, but Bran was still holding her hand, and she could not move. Outside the tower, Wolf began to howl. Catelyn trembled just for a second. Bran's. Robb opened the window and let the night air in the stuffy tower room. The howling grew louder. It was a cold and lonely sound, full of melancholy and despair. Don't, she told him. Bran needs to stay warm. He needs to hear them sing, Robb said. Somewhere out in Winterfell, a second wolf began to howl in a chorus with the first. Then a third, closer. Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind, Robb said. Their voices rose and fell together. I guess trying to think about a third closer. So the direwolves at Winterfell are Shaggy Dog, Grey Wind, and Summer. So when he's saying that howling grew, there's a wolf outside the window. It has to be either Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind. And then a second wolf began to howl in the chorus with the first. And then a third closer. But then Robb only says Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind. Robb said as their voices rose and fell together. You can tell them apart if you listen close. So of course the question is who is this third direwolf? It's either Summer in the room, a third closer, though that's right there and loud. Or it's like something in Catelyn's head. I mean, I guess, the simplest answer is that it's Summer right there. But it's funny that it's not mentioned that it, like, oh, Summer in the room, so, starts singing. But then it's a third closer. But then Robb doesn't even mention it. I mean, the simplest answer is that it's summer, but it's a funny little situation here. That it sounds like the wolf is outside in the context, so maybe it's imagined by Catelyn, but uh, um, or maybe it's just summer. It's a little hard. It's a little weird. Catelyn was shaking. So I think she's upset because now this is again reminding her of the Mama Direwolf prophecy and all of the problems of it, and she's getting upset because she's reminded of the direwolves are reminding her of it. Either that, or there's something supernatural going on. It was the grief, the cold, the howling of direwolves. Night after night, the howl and the cold wind and the gray, empty castle. On and on they went, never changing. And her boy lying there, broken, the sweetest of her children, the gentlest. Bran, who loved to laugh and climb and dreamt of knighthood, all gone now. She would never hear him laugh again. Sobbing, she pulled her hand free of his and covered his ears against those terrible howls. Make them stop, she cried. I can't stand it. Make them stop. Make them stop. Kill them all if you must. Just make them stop. She didn't remember falling to the floor, and there she was, and Robb was lifting her, holding her in strong arms. Don't be afraid, mother. They would never hurt him. He helped her to her narrow bed in the corner of the sick room. Close your eyes, he said gently. Rest. Mr. Lewin tells me that you've hardly slept since Bran's fall. I can't, she wept. Gods forgive me, Robb, I can't. What if he dies while I'm sleeping? What if he dies? What if he dies? The wolves were still howling. She screamed and held her ears again. Oh God, close the window. See, this makes it think that like Summer is not in the room, because closing the window obviously wouldn't stop the loudest of the dire wolves. Or maybe she's thinking if the other wolves can't be heard, maybe Summer would stop. Anyway. If you swear to me you'll sleep, Robb went to the window. As he reached for the shutters, another sound was added to the mournful howling of direwolves. Dogs, he said, listening. All the dogs are barking. They've never done that before. Catelyn heard his breath catch in his throat. When she looked up, his face was pale in the lamplight. Fire, he whispered. Fire, she thought, and then, Bran. Help me, she said urgently, sitting up. Help me with Bran. Robb did not seem to hear her. The library tower is on fire, he said. Catelyn could see the flickering reddish light through the open window now. She sagged with relief. Sighed with relief. Bran was safe. The library was across the bailey. There was no way the fire would reach them here. Ah, thank the gods, she whispered. Yes, very interesting that the two chapters, Catelyn 3 and Tyrion 2, Tyrion talking about how he saved these books from the library and the library burning, are two chapters that are happening simultaneously. That we get this feeling that like George planted this idea that these books were going to be important. They haven't really, they certainly are not important yet, but he's kept these books around in case they're going to be important at some point. But this is definitely written, these two ideas were written in tandem, that the books were saved from the library. Robb looked at her as if she'd gone mad. Mother, stay here. I'll come back as soon as the fire's out. He ran then. She heard him shout, and guards outside the room heard them descending together in a wild rush, taking the stairs 2 and 3 at a time. Outside there were shouts of fire in the yard, screams, running footsteps, and the whinny of frightened horses and the frantic barking of castle dogs. The howling was gone, she realized, and she listened to the cacophony. The direwolves had fallen silent. Catelyn said a silent prayer of thanks to the sun gods as she went to the window. Across the bailey, long tongues of flames shot from the windows of the library. She watched the smoke rise into the sky and thought sadly of all the books the Starks had gathered over the centuries. That, of course, that Tyrion has taken some. It's actually quite obvious. that this is pointed out. Then she closed the shutters. When she turned away from the window, the man was in the room with her. You weren't supposed to be here, he muttered sourly. No one was supposed to be here. He was a small, dirty man in filthy brown clothing, and he stank of horses. Catelyn knew all the men who worked in the stables, and he was none of them. He was gaunt, with limp blonde hair and pale eyes, deep sunk in a bony face, and there was a dagger in his hand. Clearly, being gaunt with pale eyes, he's supposed to at least remind us of an other, even, but of course he's just a dude. But nonetheless, he's there as either a corpse or an other or whatever. Now, for this is one of the things that fans kind of joke about, is that this plan from this man, the Catspaw, is a ridiculous plan. Okay, he painstakingly waits 8 days, and he's been given his payment already. He's been given a very nice dagger, or he's been given 90 pieces of silver and all of this. There's no reason for him to just like, fuck off and not go through with his plan. And he instead, like, he should have just fucked off. Like, he got his 90 pieces of silver. Joffrey's gone if it was Joffrey who paid him. Mance Rayder is gone if it's Mance Rayder that paid him. Littlefinger is not around. Like, just take your money. Just take your money and go. Plus, you have a Valyrian steel dagger, which is massively expensive. And so he comes up with the plan of starting the library on fire, thinking that all of the guards and Catelyn and the direwolf will not be in the room, allowing him to come in to kill Bran, even though the boy's already in a coma and he doesn't really need to stab him. He could probably just, put a pillow over his face or whatever. But anyway, he used that moment to go in there to murder Bran. All the distraction. Catelyn looked at the knife, then at Bran. "No," she said, the word struck in her throat, the merest whisper. He must have heard her. "It's a mercy," he said. "He's dead already." Now, mercy is, of course, this word that's thrown around so much in Ice and Fire. Obviously it's what Joffrey says of his killing of Ned at the end. The gift of mercy is talked about from the Hound, and when he talks to Arya, the gift of, it's called a mercy at the House of Black and White. And of course, specifically with Bran, it's a mercy. Mercy is the word that Jaime uses to describe what would happen if he kills Bran. And even after, Tyrion and Jaime decide that Joffrey did it, mercy is what it's described by Val of the Wildlings, with this idea that children that are dying or dead should just be killed in a mercy as well. So this word comes back quite a bit. It's a mercy. He's dead already. He's dead already is also really kind of interesting, especially if you believe in like time traveling Bran and things like that Bran has died a million times, and so he is, in a way, he's dead already. "No," Catelyn said, louder now as she found her voice again. "No, you can't." She spun back towards the window to scream for help, but the man moved faster than she would have believed. One hand clamped down over her mouth and yanked back her head, and the other brought the dagger up to her windpipe. The stench of him was overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, this was a really, really bad plan. After 8 days of like avoiding people, he somehow thought that everyone would just be in the like no one would be in the room, especially the direwolf. I mean, that's the dumbest part. Like, they all know about the direwolf. She reached up with both hands and grabbed the blade with all her strength, pulling it away from her throat. He heard him cursing into her ear. Her fingers were slippery with blood, but he would not let go of the dagger. The hand over her mouth clenched more tightly, shutting off her air. Catelyn twisted her head to the side and managed to get through a piece of his flesh. Get a piece of his flesh between her teeth. She bit down so hard into his palm. The man grunted in pain. She ground her teeth together and tore at him, and all of a sudden he let go. The taste of blood filled her mouth. She sucked in and screamed, and he grabbed her hair and pulled her away from him, and then she stumbled and went down. And then he was standing over her, breathing hard, shaking. The dagger was still clutched tightly in his right hand, slick with blood. "You weren't supposed to be here," he repeated stupidly. Catelyn saw the shadow slip through the open door behind him. Oh. I guess I made a mistake there. Summer is not in the room. Summer was closer in the castle and then comes up. So maybe Summer. See, now the question is, where was Summer? He wasn't in the room, but he was nearby. He somehow sensed everything and then made his way into the castle and went up. So you always assume it's Summer because the dog is in there howling when Joffrey is talking about the noise. But then Summer wasn't in there, I guess, and then he goes up. So the third now going back. See, I got confused because I think in the show he's just in the room the whole time. But so I guess the third, maybe it's not the whole like Catelyn's in her head. Maybe it's just that it's in the castle somewhere, but they didn't want to mention Summer's name because they wanted this to be a surprise later. Shadow slipped through the door. Low rumble, a snarl, mere whisper of a threat. But he must have heard something because he started to turn just as the wolf made its leap. They went down together, half sprawled over Catelyn where he'd followed. The wolf had him under the jaw. The man's shriek lasted less than a second before the beast wrenched its head back, taking out half his throat. Yeah, it's weird though that Robb didn't say like, oh, and that's Summer's too, So I guess Summer was somewhere. Summer was somewhere, and then he comes in at the last moment. This somewhat parallels the fact that it's like that it's Ghost who saves Mormont, and so and is able to, and the leads Jon there and things like that. That's the wolves saving people in the nick of time. The blood felt like warm rain as it sprayed across her face. The wolf was looking at her. Its jaws were red and wet, and its eyes glowed dark in the room. It was Bran's wolf, she realized. Of course it was. "Thank you," Catelyn whispered, her voice faint and tiny. She lifted her hand, trembling. The wolf patted closer, sniffed her fingers, then licked the blood with a wet, rough tongue. When it cleaned all the blood off her hand, it turned away silently and jumped up on Bran's bed and lay down beside him. Catelyn began to laugh hysterically. Yeah, that's really weird because these are massive cuts. She'd still be bleeding. You can't just like clean away all the blood. Like she's still going to just keep bleeding. It's kind of weird, right? Like she should be just gushing blood out of her hands, out of her fingers. It's not like the dog can just go like lick them and then it's fine. That was the way they found them. When Robb and Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick burst in with half the guards in Winterfell, when the laughter finally died in her throat, they wrapped her in a warm blanket and led her back to the Great Keep to her own chambers. Yeah, why don't you stop the bleeding? Old Nan undressed her and helped her into a scalding bath and washed the blood off her with a soft cloth. Yeah, maybe you should stop the bleeding. Afterwards, Maester Luwin arrived to dress the wounds. Finally. Stop the bleeding. The cuts were in her fingers went deep, almost to the bone. Oh God, they should have stopped the bleeding. Oh man. Instead they're freaking giving her blankets and giving her a bath. Stay. Can you stop the bleeding, please? Let's give you a bath, Cat. No, no. Can you stop the bleeding? How about this blanket? The cuts in her fingers went deep, almost to the bone, and her scalp was raw and bleeding where he'd pulled off a handful of hair. Oh yeah, the scalp is bleeding? The maester told her the pain was just starting now and gave her milk of the poppy to help her sleep. Finally, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, he told her that she'd slept for 4 days. I didn't need to be out 4 days. Jesus fucking Christ. I had some cuts on my hand and somebody yanked out some hair. I didn't need to be out for 4 days. Oh God. That's just the medical Maester Lewin's medical abilities. Oh God. Catelyn nodded and sat up in bed. It all seemed like a nightmare to her now, everything since Bran's fall, a terrible dream of blood and grief, and she had the pain in her hands to remind her that it was real. She felt weak and lightheaded, yet strangely resolute, as if a great weight had been lifted from her. Bring me some bread and honey, she told her servants. I haven't eaten in 4 days because somebody decided to give me opium, too much opium. And take word to Maester Lewin that my bandages weren't changing. Yeah. They looked at her in surprise and ran to do her bidding. Catelyn remembered the way she had been before, and she was ashamed. She had let them all down, her children, her husband, her house. It would not happen again. She would show these northerners how strong a Tully of Riverrun could be. And here we do see, just like a switch, Catelyn goes from being completely out of it, like mentally just incapable of assigning a master of horse or doing anything like that, to just being completely on top of it and being in control. And maybe it's the clarity of I know who my enemies are and all of this kind of stuff. Or maybe there's something supernatural going on, people messing with her head. But it's quite amazing here when you think, like, because remember, her motivation for not leaving Bran was, what if he dies when I'm not here? You know, and she's just a wreck. And then all of a sudden, boom, I have to leave. Like, I have to leave Bran immediately. It is a crazy, crazy change of personality here that we suddenly have after Catelyn's given opium. Robb arrived before her food. Roderick Cassel came with him, and her husband's ward Theon Greyjoy, and lastly Hallis Mullen, who I think famously now has Ned's bones. That's what we know about Hallis Mullen. A muscular guardsman with a square brown beard. He was the new captain of guard, Robb said. Her son was dressed in boiled leather and ringmail, she saw, and his sword hung at his waist. Who was he? Catelyn asked them. No one knows his name, Hallis Mullen told her. He was no man of Winterfell, milady, but some says they seen him here and about the castle for the past weeks. One of the king's men, then, she said, or one of the Lannisters. He would have waited behind when the others left. Maybe, Hal said. With all these strangers filling up Winterfell of late, there's no way of saying who he belonged to. He'd been biding in your stables, hiding in your stables. I think this is a misprint. Is that? I mean, there's biding your time, but yeah, it's hiding. I think this is just a scam. You could smell it on him. How did he go unnoticed? She said sharply. Hallis Mullen looked abashed. Between the horses Lord Eddard took south with them and sent in the night's watch, the stalls were half empty. It would be no great trick to hide from the stable boys. Could be Hodor saw him. The talk is that the boy's been acting queer, but simple as he is, Hal shook his head. We found where he'd been sleeping. He had 90 silver stags and a leather bag buried beneath the straw. And this is also suspicious because later we find out that when Mance Rayder came to Winterfell, he supposedly just had a bag of silver. So this idea that there's this idea that maybe this is Mance Rayder's bag of silver that he gave the man, because he was like hanging with the others at the back of the, and he'd be because he's a northerner, he's north of the wall, be interested in mercy, killing, child, and things like that. It's good to know that my son's life was not sold cheaply, Catelyn said bitterly. Hal Smalan looked at her, confused. Begging your grace, milady, you say he was out to kill your boy? Greyjoy was doubtful. That's madness. And this is the thing, is like, well, we'll get to this. He came for Bran, Catelyn said. He kept muttering how I wasn't supposed to be there. He kept the library fire. He set the library fire, thinking I would rush to put it out, taking any guards with me. If I hadn't been half mad with grief, it would have worked. I just don't know. I mean, I guess. I mean, it's true that like in olden times people are bored. So what would you do other than go out and look at fire? But it's a big risk. It's a big risk that every guard would be taken. And that the direwolf wouldn't get him, which, Why would anyone want to kill Bran, Robb said. Gods, he's only a little boy, helpless, sleeping. Catelyn gave her firstborn a challenging look. If you were to rule in the North, you must think things through, Robb. Answer your own question. Why would anyone want to kill a sleeping child? Before he could answer, the servants returned with plates of food fresh from the kitchen. There was much more than she'd asked for: hot bread, butter and honey, and blackberry preserves, a rasher of bacon, and a soft-boiled egg, a wedge of cheese, a pot of mint tea. Thanks, George R.R. Martin. Thank you for the food descriptions. And with it came Maester Luwin. How's my son, Maester? Catelyn looked at all the food and found she had no appetite. She hasn't eaten in 4 days. Jeez. 4 days, come on. Maester Luwin lowered his eyes. Unchanged, my lady. It was the reply she expected, no more, no less. Her hands throbbed with pain as if the blades were still in her, cutting deep. She sent the servants away and looked back to Robb. Do you have the answer yet? Someone's afraid Bran might wake up, Robb said, afraid of what he might say or do, afraid of something he knows. Now, of course, this is what the reader is thinking. Robb comes, especially on the first read through. It's natural that Robb comes to that conclusion. Catelyn has come to that conclusion. And of course, it's supposed to be wrong. Like, Bran is killed as a mercy. At least if you believe the Joffrey position. Even if we believe the Mance Rayder position, Mance could also be causing chaos. Mance would also want to cause chaos in the kingdoms. And the mercy would be kind of a double lucky thing. And then if you think it's like Littlefinger, then it's just chaos. It's not really what he knows. So in a sense, no matter what answer it is, if it's Joffrey or Littlefinger or Mance, and those are kind of the three remaining like theories out there, that the Catspaw, was sent by Joffrey, as Tyrion and Jaime believe, or maybe he was sent by Littlefinger, or maybe he was sent by Mance, but none of those people were concerned about what he might say or do, right? They were 100%, killing him for other reasons, to either cause chaos or for mercy. And even if you think like time traveling Bran is manipulating the timeline and he wanted to put himself in a coma and do all sorts of things to have events, it's also not about what he might say or do. Catelyn was proud of him, but he's wrong. Robb's wrong. Very good. She turned to the new captain of guard. We must keep Bran safe. If there was one killer, there could be others. How many guards do you want, milady? Hal asked. As long as Hal Smalan, see, he has a surname, You're thinking that Hallis Mullen would be um would be highborn. He's sitting there using Milady. Now, granted, even though George writes a chapter about Milady, My Lady Milady in A Dance with Dragons, he's not even very consistent with it, and so but Hallis Mullen saying Milady. So long as Lord Eddard is away, my son is the master of Winterfell, she told him. Robb stood a little taller. Put one man in the sick room night and day, one outside the door, two at the bottom of the stairs. No one sees Bran without my warrant or my mother's. As you say, my lord. Do it now, Catelyn suggested. And let this wolf stay in the room with him, Robb added. Yes, Catelyn said. And then again, yes. Hallis Mullen bowed and left the room. Lady Stark, Sir Roderick said when the guardsman had gone, did you chance notice the dagger the killer used? The circumstances did not allow me to examine closely, but I can vouch for its edge, Catelyn replied with a dry smile. Why do you ask? We found the knife still in the villain's grasp. It seemed to me that it was altogether too fine a weapon for such a man. So I looked at it long and hard. The blade is Valyrian steel, the hilt dragon bone. A weapon like that has no business being in the hands of such as him. Someone gave it to him. This is the kind of the big contradiction of the Catspaw story, and why, like, I'd say most fans, once they think about it, are like, the Catspaw story doesn't make any sense at all. It's a Valyrian steel with a dragon bone, and we're specifically told in the parallel chapter to this, Tyrion 2, that Dragonbone is special and that it seems to drink light, and that it's and Valyrian steel has the ripples in it and all of this stuff, right? And yet later, when Tyrion thinks that it's Joffrey, it's because it's a simple blade, and he wouldn't have known. He would, like, Joffrey didn't know what Valyrian steel and Dragonbone would look like, and he just was like, whatever. It's all through this book, the characters are saying, oh, this is a very special dagger. This was not something that should be on this guy. People would have noticed this thing. And then later it's like, no, actually this dagger is completely simple. So it's quite a contradiction on should the blade be noticed or not? And that's the real thing. Should it be noticed or not? If this guy has such a blade, why is he even here? Like, why does he need to kill the boy with it? It's knives aren't that hard to find, you know. Like, why did it need to be a gift? And you're like, oh wait, because it needed to be a gift because it was such a nice dagger. But if it was such a nice dagger, then it would have been traced back. Okay, then maybe it's Littlefinger wanting it to be traced back. The whole thing gets confusing, and, you know, maybe George didn't want us to really have a very good answer and wanted to be confusing. I don't know. Catelyn nodded, thoughtful. Robb, close the door. He looked at her stranger, but he did as she told him. What I'm about to tell you must not leave this room, she told them, and I'm going to allow Theon Greyjoy to listen to. I want your oaths on that. Even if part of what I suspect is true, none of my girls have ridden into deadly danger, and a word in the wrong ear could mean their lives. Lord Eddard is a second father to me, said Theon Greyjoy. I do swear. Okay, Theon. If you say so, Theon. You have my oath, Maester Luwin said. And mine, my lady, echoed Sir Roderick. She looked at her son. And you, Robb? He nodded in consent. Okay, I need you to swear, Robb. I'm going to totally accept Theon Greyjoy's swear, like, even though I don't trust him. My sister Lysa believes the Lannisters murdered her husband, Lord Arryn, in the hand of the king, Catelyn told them. It comes to me that Jaime Lannister did not join the hunt that day. Bran fell. He remained here in the castle. The room was deathly quiet. I do think Bran fell from that tower. I do not think Bran fell from that tower, she said in the stillness. I think he was thrown. The shock was plain on their faces. My lady, that is a monstrous suggestion, said Roderick Cassel. Even the Kingslayer would flinch at the murder of an innocent child. Or would he? Theon Greyjoy asked. I wonder. There is a limit to Lannister pride, or there is no limit to Lannister pride or Lannister ambition, Catelyn said. The boy had always been sure-handed in the past, Maester Luwin said thoughtfully. He knew every stone in Winterfell. I mean, says every climber before they fall. People, it's a... Oh, Mr. Lewin. Gods, Robb swore, his face dark with anger. If this is true, he'll pay for it. He drew his sword, waved it in the air. I'll kill him myself. Sir Roderick bristled at him. Put that away. The Lannisters are 100 leagues away. Never draw your sword unless you mean to use it. How many times have I told you, foolish boy? Abashed, Robb sheathed the sword, suddenly a child again. Catelyn said to Sir Roderick, I see my son is wearing steel now, the master at arms said. I thought it was time. Robb was looking at her anxiously. Past time, she said. Winterfell may have need of all its swords, and they have best not be made of wood. Theon Greyjoy put a hand on his hilt of his blade and said, My lady, if it comes to that, my house owes yours a great debt. Really? Like, it's so over the top. Like, Theon's like so over the top here that everybody should be like, really, Theon? Like, oh, when we killed your brothers in war and took you as a hostage for years? Okay. All right. Maester Lewin pulled up. I mean, it's pretty clear, like, at this point in the story, George doesn't really know, like, the relationship between Stark and Greyjoy. Maester Lewin pulled his chain collar where it chafed against his neck. All we have is conjecture. This is the Queen's beloved brother we mean to accuse. She will not take it kindly. We must have proof and forever keep silent. Forever keep silent. Your proof is in the dagger, Sir Roderick said. A fine blade like that will not have gone unnoticed. This is this thing. Like, is the dagger noticeable or not? There's only one place to find the truth of it, Catelyn realized. Someone must go to King's Landing. I'll go, Robb said. And here, this is something that this is clearly like something that's forced in order to have Catelyn in the action. Because when you really think about this, like, think about all the things that force Catelyn in here. She says, no, your place is here. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. That's this kind of like invented convention, that there must always be the Stark and Lord in Winterfell. Like, the Lord must always be at the castle. Really? How does war work then? Like, like historically in our world, like, lords often had castles that they never visited when they had many lands. But also, like, what if you had to fight, like, during the Crusades? Like, people were gone for years, like many years. Like, that's the entire plot of Robin Hood, right? That the king is gone for years fighting in the Crusades. This idea of, like, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Like, there's never a time where, like, the Starks are out, like, at war. It's this weird convenience. Like, oh no, you can't go, Robb, because there has to be always a Stark in Winterfell. Okay, well, I mean, Bran's there, Rickon's there, but okay. She looked at Sir Roderick with his great white whiskers, and Maester Lewin in his gray robes. At young Greyjoy, lean, dark, and impetuous. Who to send? These are her choices, right? Like, first of all, great. Like obviously she would never send Greyjoy, and yet she considers it here. Should I send Roderick, Lewin, or Theon? Who to send? Like, what? You never even considered Theon. What are you talking about? But they haven't really established the relationship yet. Who would be believed? Well, I mean, Sir Roderick and Maester Lewin would both be believed. They would clearly. Then she knew. Catelyn struggled to push back her blankets. the bandaged finger stiff and unyielding as stone. She climbed out of the bed. I must go myself. Must she? Like, must she? Like, really ask yourself, like, yeah, and she just sent Sir Roderick by himself. Like, that wouldn't have been enough. She needed to go. All right. Like, Ned wouldn't have trusted Sir Roderick if he showed up and like told him the story. Okay. My lady, said Maester Lewin, is that wise? Surely the Lannisters would greet your arrival with suspicion. What about Bran? Robb asked. The poor boy looked utterly confused now. You can't mean to leave him. Yeah, considering that this was like her thing, like I can't leave his side for weeks and I'm going to go nuts. And then it's just like, all of a sudden she's like, I've done everything I can for Bran. Complete switch, complete 180. I mean, I would say there has to be like mental manipulation of Cat in this chapter, realistically. Like, it's such a crazy switch of her personality. I can't actually even think. I mean, even when she chooses to release like Jaime, that there's a lot of build up to that. But this is just she's one character and then she is completely another. I've done everything I can for Bran. She said, laying a wooden hand on his arm. His life is in the hands of the gods and Maester Lewin. As you reminded yourself, Robb, I have other children to think of now. I mean, it's so weird, right? Like, she was against the land. Before this all happened, she thought that the Lannisters murdered Jon Arryn. So there's already this anti-Lannister like thing driving, and now it's like, no, well, even more so. Boom. She was crippled before, but now you'll need a strong escort, my lady, Theon said. I'll send Hal with a squad of guardsmen. No, Catelyn said. A large party attracts unwelcome attention. I would not have the Lannisters know I'm coming. Sir Roderick protested. My lady, let me accompany you at least. The King's Road can be perilous for a woman alone. I will not be taking the King's Road, Catelyn replied. She thought for a moment, then nodded her consent. 2 riders can move as fast as one, and one a good deal faster as a long column burdened by wagons and wheelhouses. I welcome your company, Sir Roderick. We will follow the White Knife down to the sea and hire a ship at White Harbor. Strong horses and brisk winds will bring us to King's Landing well ahead of Ned and the Lannisters. And then she thought, we shall see what we shall see. So yeah, this is it's a fucking fantastic, exciting chapter. It is. It's so fucking fun. It is so fucking fun. It's also so over the top ridiculous with characters just acting bonkers. They act absolutely bonkers in this whole thing. And I'm talking like the cat's paw. Catelyn is just out of control, going in different directions. It's such a fun chapter, but it's also just so ridiculous. Oh man. Anyway, I mean, I don't know. Tell me, you guys tell me what you think. If you think that like it's just Catelyn now just feels driven or something after the attack, or if there's mental manipulation or something going on. Yeah, one of the two. Who knows? But there it is. Anyway, that's Catelyn 3. A fun one. But all right, we'll move on. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.